Hey there, welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case, and tonight Joe Biden gives his first interview since ending his reelect campaign. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's campaign is hacked by Iran, and yet another American base is attacked in the Middle East. And still filling in for Renata Kiss this week is our friend FISM's Ian Patrick. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you so much, Sam. Happy to be back after the last couple of days we had off, obviously playing a couple of A Moment in History specials. And when we take a few days off from the news, a lot seems to happen. So there's a lot that seems to be going on with both the Democrat and Republican campaigns at the moment, wouldn't you say?
That's exactly right. And we will actually start off by taking a look at what the Democrats are doing. We begin with that Biden interview, which, as I said, is the first the president's given since ending his reelect campaign last month. Sitting down with CBS News over the weekend, Biden explained why he decided not to seek a second term, basically admitting his fellow Democrats forced him to step down.
Look, the polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. You'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, why did so, and I thought it'd be a real distraction.
Now, beyond just pressure from his own party, Biden also said the need to defeat Donald Trump was also a major factor in his decision.
I give you my word, I think that I mark my words. If he wins this nomination, this election, watch what happens. It's a danger. He's a genuine danger to American security.
Biden said he has a, quote, obligation to the country to help defeat Trump this November, saying he plans to do whatever he can to help Vice President Kamala Harris win the election.
And while we're on the topic of the former president, Donald Trump's campaign said on Saturday that it was actually hacked after internal documents were leaked to the press. Trump's campaign said that hostile foreign actors from Iran were behind the hack, citing a Microsoft report. A statement to Trump's Truth Social reads, quote, "They were only able to get publicly available information, but nevertheless, they shouldn't be doing anything of this nature." Now, the hackers reportedly broke into the account of a high-ranking official within the Trump campaign back in June of this year. From there, Politico began receiving emails from an anonymous account that included these publicly available documents. But those emails were soon found to be part of a spear phishing campaign from the Iranian hackers, according to Trump's team. Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung said that the hack was, quote, intended to interfere with the 2024 election and sow chaos throughout our democratic process.
And turning our attention now to Kamala Harris's campaign, which is trying to clean up a controversy surrounding her running mate's military record. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who served for decades in the National Guard, is now facing intense criticism for past comments suggesting he served in war, despite never actually being deployed to a combat zone.
I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army, and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
That was Walz speaking about gun control back in 2018. The resurfaced video has prompted attacks from Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, who also served for 4 years in the Marines.
This is a guy who was captured on video saying, I carried a gun in war. He never went to war. This is a guy who's been captured on video. As other people say, he's an Afghanistan veteran. He's a veteran of a war, nodding along in agreement instead of saying, no, I did serve my country and I did it honorably, but I never went to a war zone. I'm not criticizing Tim Walz's service. I'm criticizing the fact that he lied about his service for political gain.
The Harris campaign has since issued a statement saying Walz, quote, misspoke about his military record. Meanwhile, Walz is also facing scrutiny for retiring from the military in order to run for Congress in 2005, just 2 months before his unit received deployment orders for Iraq. Some of his former members of his unit have since accused Walz of retiring early in order to dodge the war.
Meanwhile, over the weekend, Vice President Kamala Harris became the second presidential candidate in the 2024 race to apparently promise to exclude tips from federal taxes. Such a proposal was initially announced by former President Donald Trump weeks earlier, as seen in this side-by-side comparison.
Because when I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
Taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Ironically enough, both candidates actually made their announcements while rallying in Las Vegas, but as I said, at different times of their campaigns. Vice President Harris's announcement was made this past Saturday, specifically at the University of Nevada. But former President Trump quickly responded to Harris's pledge, writing on social media, quote, "The difference is she won't do it. She just wants it for political purposes. This was a Trump idea. She has no ideas. She can only steal from me." The dueling pledges are believed to be part of an effort by both candidates to secure the battleground state of Nevada. That state has the highest concentration of tipped workers in the country. Although President Biden narrowly won the state in 2020, recent polls have shown that the race in Nevada is currently a toss-up.
And speaking of Trump ideas, the former president is looking to shake things up at the Federal Reserve. Speaking at a press conference last week, Trump said he believes that presidents should have a say in the Fed's decision-making, especially when it comes to interest rates.
The Federal Reserve is a very interesting thing, and it's sort of gotten it wrong a lot. And he's tending to be a little bit late on things. He gets a little bit too early and a little bit too late. And, you know, that's very largely it's a gut feeling. But I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful. And I think I have a better instinct than, in many cases, people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
The proposal would be a major change for the historically independent central bank. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, is also backing the idea, saying the voters should have more of a say in how the economy is run.
President Trump is saying, I think, something that's really important and actually profound, which is that the political leadership of this country should have more say over the monetary policy of this country. I agree with him. That should fundamentally be a political decision. Agree or disagree, we should have America's elected leaders having input about the most important decisions confronting our country. If the American people don't like our interest rate policy, they should elect somebody different to change that policy. Nothing should be above democratic debate in this country when it comes to the big questions confronting the United States.
Meanwhile, Trump previously said he has no plans to oust Fed Chair Jerome Powell if reelected. Despite being frustrated with some of his decisions, Powell's term as chair is set to end in 2026.
But despite all the talk against the Federal Reserve, it does seem that the stock market has, for the most part, recovered. As you are probably well aware, last week proved to be the most volatile week of the year for investors after a mass sell-off saw stocks plummet. The market closed on Friday, however, just shy of completely reversing its weekly losses, part of which was spurred by the Federal Reserve's decision to keep rates where they are. But as of last Friday, the S&P 500 briefly turned positive for the week, but investors still heavily shifted into money market funds, with $47.5 billion, making it the largest weekly inflow since April. And it's a marked retreat from riskier assets amid concerns of an economic slowdown caused by the Federal Reserve's high and consistent, as I said, interest rates. And up next, we'll get to all the latest in the Middle East as well as other areas of the world. We'll be right back after this.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
Saving the unborn is one of the most amazing things that we can do in this day and age. Hi, my name is Shanna Burt, host of Financial Issues. Would you go to preborn.org right now? Consider giving $140. That will allow 5 young mothers to hear the heartbeat of their baby and change their mind to choose life over abortion. Go to preborn.org. That's preborn.org. It's an incredible ministry, Preborn. We're fighting back through saving tens of thousands of lives. And Preborn doesn't just save the baby. They ask these young mothers to go through a program of evangelism so that their eternal lives might be saved as well. Would you come alongside us for the kingdom, for the glory of Christ? Go to preborn.org. That's preborn.org.
And welcome back once again to FISM News. I'm Ian Patrick. Let's continue with our coverage for today, starting with an update from the war in Gaza, where Israel has now ordered more evacuations in the southern part of Gaza as it seeks to eradicate the remainder of Hamas's military unit. Israel made the decision to return to heavily destroyed areas in Gaza, including cities such as Khan Yunis. According to Israeli officials, rockets had recently been fired from these areas, including from part of an Israeli-declared humanitarian zone. Israel dumped leaflets from the sky to the citizens in making this announcement. And as we've covered on FISM News previously, Hamas has notoriously encamped itself underneath and within civilian infrastructure, making them a difficult enemy to encounter as Israel strives to avoid unnecessary casualties.
And as Israel continues its assault on Gaza, Hamas is now walking away from the latest round of ceasefire talks. Hamas says it will now not participate in this Thursday's talks, citing the assassination of their political leader Ismail Haniyeh. It also comes as Hamas is also claiming an Israeli airstrike on a school compound killed nearly 100 civilians. Israel says that number is greatly inflated and that Hamas was actually using the school as a command center, something that Ian was just referencing in that last story. Meanwhile, the White House says it's deeply concerned and is seeking more information about what happened with that airstrike.
You know, yet again, there are far too many civilians who've been killed. I mean, Israel has a right to go after the terrorists that are Hamas. But as I have said many, many times, they also have, I believe, an important responsibility to avoid civilian casualties.
But again, it isn't just Hamas that Israel is fighting. It also has to be wary of Hezbollah militants to the north in Lebanon. In fact, just recently, the IDF confirmed that Lebanon's Hezbollah terrorists had fired yet another round of missiles into Israel. A spokesman said that sirens in northern Israel sounded off after about 30 projectiles were seen crossing from the border of Lebanon into Israel. Those missiles reportedly fell in open areas, according to the spokesperson, and no injuries were reported from that strike. But this does mark the latest attack from the Hezbollah militant group, which is retaliating against Israel for the assassination of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, as well as a recent Hezbollah leader, Fouad Shukr.
And as those tensions in the Middle East continue, they do put our troops at risk. On Friday, several U.S. and coalition personnel were injured in a drone attack in Syria. Officials say none of their injuries are serious, but some of them are being examined for traumatic brain injuries. It's now the second major attack on U.S. forces in less than a week now, following last Monday's rocket strike on the Al-Assad air base in Iraq. No group has claimed responsibility for Friday's strike, though the U.S. does typically blame Iran's backed militia groups for these kinds of attacks.
And you know, with those attacks against U.S. forces, as well as the looming threat of a wider war possibly on the horizon, and most likely with Iran, the United States has actually decided to beef up some of its own security in the region. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered a guided submarine missile to the region yesterday in preparation for Iran's likely attack, or retaliatory attack, they say, against Israel. There is already a nuclear-powered sub in the Mediterranean, just for context. The defense secretary also ordered the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group to accelerate its own journey to the Middle East. That strike group was expected to reach the Red Sea by the end of this month to replace the current Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group. And it is not clear when that submarine or the new strike group will exactly reach the Mediterranean. However, we do know they are currently en route.
And a quick update here in Ukraine, where forces continue what is now their largest offensive into Russian territory since the war began back in 2022. According to new reports, Ukrainian troops have advanced as far as 18 miles into Russia's Kursk region, capturing villages and border checkpoints along the way. The offensive began 6 days ago after Ukrainian ground forces used tanks and armored vehicles to capture a border outpost region. Over the weekend, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky he acknowledged the new incursion into Russia, claiming that Ukrainian forces invaded after facing long-range attacks from the region itself. Russia is trying to downplay the severity of this new incursion. The Russian Defense Ministry released a new statement yesterday saying that Russia's forces had, quote, foiled attempts by enemy mobile groups with armored vehicles to break through deep into Russian territory. And we have plenty more news coming up next, but first, let's go to Seth Udinsky for today's A Moment in History.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, the most important question from world history, unequivocally, whether you agree with it or not, is this: did the resurrection of Jesus Christ actually happen? Of course, billions of people in the world in the last 2,000 years and all the way up to today would say no. They use a variety of arguments to try to disprove the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And, you know, it's worth noting that there is a massive following of people who would jump on the bandwagon, even today. Now, in this episode, I'll show my hand early. I believe Jesus did rise from the dead, and I'd like to use our time together to give you the proof. So let's answer this question by examining and debunking the conspiracies. Now, before we begin, here's one point we all must agree on. The tomb was empty. You have to remember that. Conspiracy number one is the disciples stole the body. The Jewish leaders who killed Jesus actually concocted this one in the days after it happened. The problem with that is the 11 disciples were scared witless, hiding from the Jewish authorities who they feared were coming for them next. They just killed their Lord, remember. Add to that the fact that 11 cowardly and unarmed Jewish fishermen would stand zero chance in a fight against a regiment of fully armed Roman soldiers guarding Jesus' tomb, who would face the pain of certain death for failing to guard the tomb properly. There's no possibility that the disciples successfully fought off the soldiers, broke into Jesus' tomb, and stole the body. Conspiracy number two, the disciples hallucinated, thinking they saw the risen Lord. Now, this one is especially popular in our postmodern world where all supernatural happenings are deemed as poppycock. Several problems exist with this one. The likelihood of all 11 disciples, and by the way, one former persecutor of Christians who mysteriously switched sides for some reason after an encounter on the Damascus Road, that would be the Apostle Paul, all of them hallucinating in the exact same way and at the exact same time is simply not possible. And let's not forget, there are 500 other witnesses who saw the risen Lord Jesus after his death. The odds of this hallucination theory grow thin the larger that witness list gets. Conspiracy number three, Jesus did not actually die at his crucifixion. This one is perhaps the most foolish of all, and it comes from people who frankly know nothing about history. So let me give you a little history lesson here. The Romans were experts at killing people. They were experts at it. They made sure their victims were dead when all was said and done. The amount of blood that Jesus lost, the beating his body took from the nails and from the crown of thorns, the stab wound in his side where blood and water poured out, signaling a failure of organs, never mind the fact that he was then mummified and entombed for several days, makes this theory not only totally impossible, but actually quite laughable. That simply did not happen. Jesus actually died. Conspiracy number four is the disciples lied. Now, it's not likely that a group of cowardly young men who fled when they saw Jesus arrested would suddenly change their minds all of a sudden and go to their deaths for a lie. We have to use common sense here, and common sense simply does not allow for this. The disciples, who remember after Jesus' resurrection took on an entire empire after his death and resurrection, did not lie. So where does this leave us? Well, I'd like to present you a final outcome, and I believe this is the only one that actually makes sense when you consider all the evidence. Remember, the most important, that the tomb was empty, is that Jesus actually did rise from the dead. Either he was a liar or a narcissist or insane, or he was who he claimed to be. And when we study history, we have to look at the evidence, folks, and evidence tells us here that there is but one option that actually makes sense. Jesus died for our sins according to the Scriptures, was buried, and he was raised to life on the third day. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Do you know what you are supporting when you purchase mutual funds and stocks? Think about it. When you invest in a company, you make a decision to support the things that that company supports. And it may not be things that you agree with. Financial Issues is a ministry teaching people like you how to invest biblically, responsibly, keeping your investments clear of companies that may support an ungodly agenda. Learn more by going to financialissues.org. Financialissues.org.
But I felt very comfortable in that decision because I found a lot of support. Like everyone here, like always made sure like keep in contact with me. This is what ultimately changed my decision, you know, knowing that I had all this support that I didn't know I had. Now that he's here, he's 4 months old, like I look at him and I honestly, like, it just makes me want to cry, like,
Hey there, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We begin with more of those shocking undercover videos from Planned Parenthood revealing how the abortion giant harvests the body parts of babies for profit. These are very disturbing videos, but we do think they're important to show. The latest one shows a Texas-based abortionist describing how they dismember live babies. Like I said, this is horrific, during late-term abortions to avoid a federal law banning partial birth abortions. It's really tough to watch, but here's just a small bit of that video. Take a look.
No, but I mean, we know, right? Like if I'm doing a procedure and I'm in fear that it's about to come to the umbilicus, I might ask for a second set of forceps, hold the body at the cervix and pull off the leg.
Oh, so you gotta, okay.
So it's not.
Right.
Filmed by David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt of the California-based Center for Medical Progress back in 2015, the absolutely horrific footage has actually been buried for years after then State AG Kamala Harris, now Vice President, charged both Daleiden and Merritt for violating state recording laws. They are now the first undercover reporters to be prosecuted under this law. The charge also came only 2 weeks after Harris met with Planned Parenthood executives. Since then, a federal court order has blocked the videos from being released. However, a recent congressional subpoena has finally allowed them to be made available to the public to view.
Truly disturbing content there indeed, Sam, but I agree in that it's good to get that information out there to make people aware of the different things going on behind doors in Planned Parenthood. While we're on the topic of Vice President Harris, actually, she's also become the target of criticism for immigration over this weekend after she vocally promised to support a plan that would include amnesty and eventual citizenship for up to 22 million illegal immigrants in the U.S. Here's the Vice President.
We know our immigration system is broken, and we know what it takes to fix it. Comprehensive reform that includes strong border security and an earned pathway to citizenship.
The Vice President also promised during her speech to support the proposed Freedom to Vote Act, which would enact nationwide no-excuse mail-in voting. That proposed legislation would also automatically register voters. Critics have since accused Harris of working harder to secure benefits for illegal immigrants than for Americans. Heritage Foundation economist E.J. Atoni told reporters, quote, "All of the job growth we have seen has been going to foreign-born workers, a category which the Bureau of Labor Statistics admits includes illegal aliens." And Tony further warned that the proposal from the Harris campaign would lead to foreign workers further competing with American citizens for different jobs.
And in some other news, President Biden has now hit yet another roadblock in his student loan forgiveness plan. On Friday, a federal appeals court blocked President Biden's new $475 billion student debt relief plan, known as the SAVE plan. Several Republican-led states are suing to stop it, which would allow eligible borrowers to lower their monthly payments and would also have borrowers who owe $12,000 or less see their loans completely forgiven after just 10 years. In a unanimous decision, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals blocked the plan from taking effect until that lawsuit is resolved. The judges also said the plan lacked congressional approval, while calling it a vast assertion of newfound power at a level never before seen.
He does keep trying to get those student debt forgiveness bills through there. But let's shift focus now away from politics into news on the Paris Olympics, which recently just wrapped up this past weekend, and what a time it was for the Games media host, that being NBC. According to analytics, the first 13 days of the Games left an average of around 32.2 million viewers across NBC Universal's TV and streaming platforms. In streaming alone, that data, provided by Nielsen and Adobe Analytics, shows a remarkably greater interest in watching the Olympics this year than back in 2021. And what I was going to say before is that in streaming alone, it actually became the second most streamed event in all of streaming, right underneath Bridgerton, surprisingly enough, that being from Amazon, or rather Netflix, The 2020 Tokyo Games was obviously troubled and hindered by the COVID-19 pandemic, even forcing it to be held a year later in 2021. But this year's Games showed a 76% increase in viewership than the last Summer Games. The increased interest in the Games has actually proved to be great for business at NBC Universals, and the executive there has taken notice. In fact, they're already planning ahead for the upcoming Winter Games in Milan.
And of course, the Olympics did end with another gold as the U.S. women's basketball team triumphed over France yesterday, the final event for the Games, and it gave the U.S. its 40th gold of the Games in total, tying China for the most gold medals altogether. The U.S. did win the overall medal count with 126 compared to China's 91. And with that, that is our program for today. So thank you so much for joining us. And please visit our website, FISMnews.tv, for more content, for more updates. Until our next show, you can also follow us on social media as well at FISM News, or you can download the FISM app to take us on the go. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.